Pro Group Management. Workers' comp that works for you.
Welcome to Nevada Newsmakers. On the broadcast today, Bryan Wachter joins us. He's Senior Vice President of Government and Public Affairs for the Retail Association of Nevada. Here for the whole show on an all-new Nevada Newsmakers.
Retail's impact on Nevada's economy? Enormous. 8,600 businesses, large and small, employing 145,000 workers. And last fiscal year, retail paid tax on nearly $60 billion in sales. We're the Retail Association of Nevada. We support retail, we help it grow, and we mean business.
RANNV.org.
Pro Group Management specializes in providing industries with the necessary components to satisfy and exceed workers' comp requirements. Every business has unique needs and specific regulations. Pro Group Management stays ahead of the curve, providing up-to-date services to keep your industry in top form. Discover how we simplify your tasks, improve efficiency, and reduce expense to keep you moving in a positive direction. Pro Group Management. Workers' comp that works for you.
Truck drivers are some of the hardest working people you'll meet, delivering over 70% of America's freight and 92% of Nevada's. When there's a natural disaster, they're delivering critical supplies to help those communities recover and rebuild. Every sector of the economy and our nation's military rely on truck drivers. So let's take a moment to say thank you. On the open road or city streets, our truck drivers are rolling to make our economy and our nation stronger. Trucking moves America.
Nevada Newsmakers Studio is located at the headquarters of the Nevada Trucking Association. Motion and purpose are a truck's greatest virtue.
This is Nevada Newsmakers with host Sam Shad, a no-holds-barred political forum. Now, from the Nevada Newsmakers broadcast headquarters, here is Sam Shad.
And back on Nevada Newsmakers, we're always pleased to welcome back to the program Bryan Wachter. He is the Senior Vice President of Government and Public Affairs at the Retail Association of Nevada. Welcome back, sir.
Thank you, Sam.
So I want to start out with a couple of things that are specifically connected to the Retail Association with a couple of your magazine articles over the last couple of months. First of all, I was in the Bay Area over just after Thanksgiving, and was almost a victim of a smash and grab out of our car. My wife and I sitting in the car. I turn around and suddenly there's a person at my back door with a car in motion next to him. Thankfully, he saw us and jumped in the car and sped away. There was in broad daylight. Downtown Oakland is no longer a place I plan to visit. Right after that were the announcements from the mayor of San Francisco that they were going to increase the police force in Union Square. How bad is it getting in Northern California?
Oh, it's getting bad in Northern California, but it's getting bad elsewhere. California just, as usual, tends to be ahead of the curve. But the amount of crime, like you're saying, Sam, it's blatant. We had a couple incidents where some customers were shot at one of the malls down in Las Vegas a couple weeks ago, in almost the exact scenario that you're outlining, Sam. This is a huge problem. It's putting customers at risk. It's putting our employees at risk. I can tell you at a hardware store a couple weeks ago, there was a gentleman attempting to scan illegitimate items through the self-scan. An employee went to see what the issue was and was shot in the leg. And so these are issues that are not just happening in California, they are happening here in Nevada as well, Sam.
Is it based, do you think, at this point in time on organized retail theft, or is it connected to the raising in some states like Nevada of the penalties for this kind of offense?
Well, it's certainly both, Sam. And when we talk about organized retail crime, we are not talking about crimes of necessity. We are not talking about stealing food for your consumption or just to feed your kids. What we're talking about is a very sophisticated crime network of people who know exactly how much that felony threshold is, how and when they're going to hit it. They come into stores with shopping lists, Sam. They know exactly what's going to sell on their online fence. Because we don't use swap meets anymore. And so it is a very sophisticated operation. So when you increase those felony thresholds, all you're doing is inviting more and more theft because these people know exactly what they can get away with and what they can't get away with.
Have you talked to Assemblyman Steve Yeager about some reforms coming up in the next session to his previous reform bills?
We have had great conversations with Chairman Yeager. He was very sympathetic and helped us during that reform bill to limit the amount of increases so that we weren't compounding this issue further. And we look forward to being part of all those conversations as we figure out what are the appropriate levels to not incentivize this type of behavior, because as we know, Sam, it's not just a property crime anymore. People are dying and people are getting hurt. And so we need to be looking for a solution to this problem.
Okay, and when we talk about inflation, I presume that the cost of goods that one is going to buy from a store is going to end up going up because of the loss rate.
Well, I think that's true, Sam, for very large retailers who, we're operating maybe $1 million per store in just loss and shrink. But for our smaller members, Sam, that don't have access to those types of margins, whose entire life savings may be in their inventory sitting in their store, there's no bouncing back from that. That's a game changer. Your business is over. And so we have to be able to make sure that we are protecting all of our businesses, not just those that might be able to, rewrite their policies, or some of our stores are even going so far as to manufacture goods that don't work unless they are sold in store. Those are the types of steps that we are taking, but unfortunately our smaller retailers, our mom and pop retailers, don't have that option, and it is going to hurt a lot of them.
Okay, in reflection now, we're taping this at the end of January. How did the Thanksgiving and Christmas season turn out for retail? Was it what you had hoped?
Well, actually, this Christmas season was very transformational. With the pandemic, with the supply chains, there was a big push to try to accommodate consumers earlier in the year. And so October actually was a very heavy holiday sales month, and we actually showed that we started trailing down towards the end of December. And so we've essentially shifted that kind of holiday sales period now into October and a few weeks ahead of Christmas. And so that's pretty transformational. It means Black Friday is no longer the start of the holiday season. It's really halftime. And so that's going to require the way we think about it, the way we measure it, and the way we operate to change a little bit. But overall, we had a fantastic holiday season. Sales were up over any year that we've had previously. And that has a lot to do with the federal stimulus, as well as income increases over the last 12 to 18 months.
Okay, and was there an increase in pricing in the stores? We certainly see it in food, for example. I think everybody is seeing an increase in costs or having to change, the kind of products they buy to match their budget. Are we seeing an increase in costs across the board, though?
I wouldn't say that it's across the board. We are seeing increases. Obviously, anything that is dependent upon a computer chip is going to have the most problematic story that we could tell. But a lot of those are just intermittent. They depend on that specific supplier, the manufacturer, where they are in the process, how big that retailer is, how much purchasing power they have. All of that can affect the price of a good. And then you increase that with the labor and the labor issues that we've been having. And so it's no wonder that we are seeing different prices go up. We've also seen a lot of manufacturers of goods announce across the board increases. Procter & Gamble was one of them, and they provide a lot of consumer goods. And so they're raising prices in reflection on what we're seeing. And so those are something that we will probably continue to see throughout the first and second quarter of this year.
One other thing that I thought was real interesting was that, over the last few years, we have kept hearing that online is going to take over and retail stores are going to go out of business, will keep shrinking. And yet Amazon keeps coming back into the retail market with brick and mortar stores. What does this say to you? Because to me it says it's just an industry reinventing itself once again, which it's been doing since the early 1900s.
No, I think that's exactly right, Sam. Retail is so in step with consumer behavior. We understand it. We're reacting to it on a daily basis. And so our industry is one that innovates all the time, every day. And so we've seen a lot of new innovations that have come out of the pandemic. But what we have not seen, and what everyone keeps suggesting we're going to, is the death of retail, or the end of Main Street. And that just, the facts don't tell that story, Sam. To your example, some of the largest internet companies are opening retail stores. They're making sure they can do that. And they're doing it, Sam, because what we found out is that companies are going to be successful if they can meet their customers where they want, when they want to be met. And so if you're online only and you have customer base that would rather go in, then you are losing out on that market share, and you're not able to compete with a lot of these retailers that can seamlessly move between all these different mediums. And that's really the key to success at this point.
Yeah, I was in the Amazon store in Berkeley, and that right before Christmas, that place was just jammed. And you went in there, and they certainly had no shortage of goods, and they certainly had no shortage of customers. So again, I think it's just a reinvention. I wanted to change topics to another issue that you guys brought up in your magazine here over the last couple of months, which is the Retail Association Matrix. Explain to folks who are watching and listening who may not be familiar with the Matrix, what is it, and what is it telling you at this point?
Sure. Well, RAND's legislative matrix is something that the Retail Association has published since 2003. And really, it was a way for our members to be able to accurately take a profile of how legislators are voting in terms of our business issues. That wasn't reliant so much on as many relationships or kind of the legislative mechanics, but really what was the end result of the legislative session, and did legislators support business or did they not? And that is really something that we're proud that we've put out since 2003. It gives us a historical context to be able to look at trends in the legislature, but it also gives us a starting off point during election cycles when candidates are running again, to really zoom in on why we think bills are bad for the retail industry, and how we could better Nevada by having more pro-business activity. And yes, legislative matrix, we have a lot of bills that we supported. Not everyone in the legislature did, but there's many on there that we did support. So it's not just about grading legislators who pass bills that are maybe just egregiously anti-business. It's really about providing a snapshot of how business-friendly the legislature was that particular session.
There are some that say that the legislature over the last few sessions has not been business-friendly, yet at the same time, everybody wants the legislature in some way or another to create jobs. That seems to be a conundrum.
I agree, Sam, although I don't know if I would ever say that it's government's responsibility to create jobs. But when you have a legislature that seems to think that everything that business does needs to be a deceptive trade practice, or even in instances where a regulatory body or an enforcement body doesn't have any evidence or data suggesting a problem is getting worse or needs a solution, but instead we come ready with a preordained solution that is going to cause trouble and is going to make running a business in Nevada more expensive. And so those are the kinds of things. I mean, on deceptive trade practice, I think there were over a dozen bills that dealt with how businesses operate, that now they are open to an additional legal liability, and that's just problematic. And that's going to increase prices as well, Sam.
All right, let's take a break. We'll come back with much more with Bryan Wachter from the Retail Association after this timeout.
Calamity. It lurks around every corner. Or not. That's why UMC Quick Care is around every corner, with locations around the valley. UMC Quick Care, for all your small calamities.
Hey guys, are you watching the game at a friend's or the bar again because you can't watch at home with your wife? Or worse, because she kicked you out and kept your couch, your flat screen, and your kids? What's the one thing a man needs when he loses a good woman? A good lawyer. And when he loses a bad woman, he needs a great lawyer. What makes a good woman a bad woman? You tell me. You're the one that can't watch the game in your own home. I'm men's rights attorney Marilyn York, and I represent men in divorce, custody, and family law matters.
The signs and symptoms of cataracts can start out small with subtle changes in your vision. So don't wait. Be proactive and take your vision into your own hands. If you're experiencing the onset of cataracts or just have questions, contact your eye care professional or call Eye Care Associates of Nevada today. Dr. Hiss has years of experience specializing in the surgical correction of eye disorders and has completed over 84,000 vision correcting procedures. At Eye Care Associates of Nevada, we'll change the way you look at the world.
As you know, Reno is booming. Toll's development company is helping it grow with insightful design and development, building community with every project, adding beauty, adding excitement, emphasizing our shared humanity. Reno is becoming bigger. Toll's development is helping it become better, more livable, more enjoyable. To learn more, go to tollsdevelopment.com. tollsdevelopment.com.
Calamity. It lurks around every corner. Or not. That's why UMC Quick Care is around every corner, with locations around the valley. UMC Quick Care, for all your small calamities.
This is Nevada Newsmakers.
And back on Nevada Newsmakers, we continue our conversation with Bryan Wachter. He's the Senior Vice President of Government and Public Affairs at the Retail Association of Nevada. So, a lot of people are talking about, as regards politics, that they want to see more in the middle. They want to see more of a moderate influence. And I'm thinking back to the Libertarian Party in the state of Nevada that for years ran candidates that didn't get elected until they changed their registration from Libertarian to Republican and got elected as Republicans. And I'm just wondering if there's any discussion of looking at, as especially Southern Nevada moves more Democratic, that you take people who are currently Republicans, changing their registration to Democrats and having them run as moderate or conservative Democrats. Is that an idea that's being discussed?
You know, I think it's an idea that is certainly worth discussion, Sam. When we look at how the legislative maps were redistricted, when we look at the growing demographic issues that we've been seeing, it is just going to simply be impossible for the business community to be able to, I think, be adequately heard at the legislature without making a concentrated effort to get more pro-business voters voting. I think that will help both on the Republican side and the Democratic side. And really, we need a conversation with those voters who are not being talked to and really getting them to buy in on our vision of Nevada going forward. And I really do think that conversation needs to be happening.
Well, I look at people like Jim Gibson, and before he changed back to being a Republican, John Lee, as people who ran in Democratic districts and were elected, and yet if they were in another location, they would have probably run as Republicans anyway.
Well, I think that's accurate, Tim, and I think you're going to find, hopefully that candidates are matching their districts, that they're out there talking to their voters, and their voters are being loud enough to start mitigating and changing some of those ideas and solutions that are talked about at the state legislature. And I think that's how we do it. And I think so far in our last couple election cycles, it's been a run to, or a race to get the cheapest, most aggressive voters out to vote. And I think we are seeing the result of that kind of election work.
All right, so a slight change of topic, and I'm not sure if you're going to answer this as a member of the Retail Association or your personal opinion, but the amount of money that Governor Sisolak announced that he's raised so far, over $8 million in the account. And we've had discussion previously on this program about not only will that help him in his own candidacy, but it would allow him to affect potentially who's elected on the other side as his opponent. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I would just say I think the governor is probably going to utilize all of that cash on hand in order to be able to return to the governor's mansion. There are a lot of things. Situationally, the circumstances have changed, and I think there are a lot of people who are unhappy. They're unhappy with the direction the state's gone. They're unhappy with the direction that the country is going, and they're not seeing any change. And so I think that is going to be an uphill climb that the governor and his coattails are going to have in Nevada going into November. I'm a little bit more worried, Sam, about the amount of money that's being spent on Republican primaries, both at the top of the ticket and in down ticket races, more than I'm worried about such a large discrepancy in the governor's fundraising.
One of the things that surprised me, and I've talked to several lieutenant governor candidates on the program, and there are several more lining up to be on the program who are credible, and they're all talking about taking $500,000 to run for lieutenant governor. That sounds like a crazy amount of money.
Well, I think that's a good example. I think when you look at some of these assembly districts that are in very deep red districts, those that even the Cook report would say no Democrat is going to have a chance in, we're still spending $500,000 combined on some of those primaries. And so I do think that is going to put us at a disadvantage going into the future as the Democratic Party, escapes some of those large primary expenditures.
Well, what's going to be interesting is, we only have 2 television markets in the state, and that's what tends to vacuum up most of the money. They are going to run out of inventory. I mean, even if they have
that's exactly right.
3-minute commercial breaks, they are going to run out of inventory. And normally they would be 2-minute breaks. In cable, it could be, well, for the local, it's still only going to be a couple of minutes, even if they increase that to perhaps 3. So you're going to see a huge increase in digital advertising. And my question there is, the effectiveness of advertising on Facebook or Twitter or some of these other platforms where basically you're just seeing a billboard because the click-through rates are phenomenally low.
There are a lot of, I think, interesting and new ways that digital, as it's becoming more and more of a necessary tool in political campaigns, are starting to utilize it. But I think your point is spot on, Sam, is that the amount of inventory and the amount of bandwidth that's going to be available is going to be minimal. Even the governor's $8 million cash on hand is going to be dwarfed by the amount of money that IEs are spent in the U.S. Senate race, certainly in the gubernatorial race. And so there comes a point where you just wonder how much money can actually be spent. I don't own a television station, but I'm sure they're eager to find out. But it is going to be difficult.
Well, and that, truthfully, that has been the survival of television stations for a number of years now, because when the car industry pulled out, 60% of their advertising is now online. When they pulled out that vast amount of money, that took away a huge base from television stations. And so political is what they live for every 18 months. And without that, I think a majority of them would have gone bankrupt. Let's take another break. I've got a quick question for you when we come back.
7 at 7 is available anytime, anywhere.
I'm Riley Smith with your Vegas Golden Knights. Watch 7 minutes of nonstop news from the Las Vegas Review-Journal.
Streaming on LVRJ.com and Twitter. Powered by the Las Vegas Review-Journal.
Modern boutique Ahern Hotel and Events Center in Las Vegas. Host meetings and events on 2 floors. Stay in luxurious rooms and suites. Unlimited branding opportunities. Regional Italian cuisine by Chef Mark Segrisi. Flexible event spaces. Full buyout options. Visit ahernhotel.com today.
I'm Jeff Gehrman, an investigative reporter with the Las Vegas Review-Journal. I'm your guide for Season 2 of Mobbed Up, The Fight for Las Vegas.
You're in with every gangster and hoodlum in the United States. I don't go for that, Mr. Kennedy. I don't go for that kind of action.
I was on television accused of fronting for the mob.
Subscribe to Mobbed Up, The Fight for Las Vegas, Season 2, today on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Before the masks, before the distancing, before the world changed, UMC was ready. Our response to COVID-19 began before the crisis did, with our own team of infectious disease experts who've spent their careers planning for this moment. With a pandemic response plan, we'd practiced again and again, and by blazing new trails in large-scale testing, including every patient we admit. Always ready. UMC.
7 at 7 is available anytime, anywhere.
I'm Riley Smith with your Vegas Golden Knights. Watch 7 minutes of nonstop news from the Las Vegas Review-Journal.
Streaming on LVRJ.com and YouTube. Powered by the Las Vegas Review-Journal.
This is Nevada Newsmakers.
And back on Nevada Newsmakers, we continue our conversation with Bryan Wachter, Senior Vice President of Government and Public Affairs at the Retail Association of Nevada. The Clark County School District, you have 90 seconds, go.
obviously they need to be able to figure out what is actually going to work going forward. What Omicron showed us, and the reason that they had to go onto a pause is because their internal systems are not working. Sam, you and I have talked about this issue quite a bit, and I can tell you that the frustration and the anger with the Clark County School District has only seemed to grow. I would say exponentially, it's grown exponentially, and that's going to be problematic. We've got kids who are not learning to read, they're not learning to add, and that's going to be compounded over the course of their lifetimes and into their adulthood. And there comes a certain time where we have to start demanding the school district do something different, because what they're doing now isn't working.
And you know what's been interesting to me for 40 years now, because that's how long I've watched this topic, is that you can bring up any subject you want and get some response. You bring up education and everybody responds. And parents, as you rightly point out, are PO'd to an extent I have never seen before.
I think it's going to play a major role in the upcoming election, Sam, and it's something that I think legislators who have some oversight in the Clark County School District are probably going to have to answer a couple questions.
Maybe more than a couple. Bryan Wachter, always a pleasure to have you on the program, sir. Thank you, and we'll be right back.
A bird's eye captures its surroundings at different heights. At Bryan Culpa Photography, we can make your imagination soar over buildings, parks, cityscapes, and beyond. Bryan's images tell the story and get the job done. If you need a new perspective to tell your story, contact Bryan today. Bryan Culpa Photography. Experience the bird's eye view at bryanculpaphotography.com.
Hey, Dad? Are you learning? This place is great. Huh? You gotta try this.
Wow, this stuff is great. People are gonna love it.
Yes. Yes, they will.
As you know, Reno is booming. Toll's development company is helping it grow with insightful design and development, building community with every project, adding beauty, adding excitement, emphasizing our shared humanity. Reno is becoming bigger. Toll's development is helping it become better, more livable, more enjoyable. To learn more, go to tollsdevelopment.com. tollsdevelopment.com.
Take a look at Pro Group Management and see how your workers' comp requirements can be met head-on. By taking a proactive approach, Pro Group can assure that your company is meeting or exceeding state and federal standards. As you move forward in your industry, Pro Group moves with you, simplifying regulatory tasks, clearing the way so you can get the job done and look to your future success. Pro Group Management, workers' comp that works for you.
Don't forget, another way of watching Nevada Newsmakers is to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Nevada Newsmakers on YouTube. We'll see you on the next broadcast.